This is the class of Parshas A. The topic is Tzedaka. There are three places in Torah where the Torah focuses on the mitzvah of Tzedaka. The first is in Parshas Mishpatim, which focuses more on the mitzvah of Kesef Talva, of giving loans. Truth of the matter is, our Parsha also does, but it talks about Tzedaka as well. The second time is in Parshas Bahar, which talks about the laws of Shemitah, the sabbatical, so it's mentioned. And the third is our Parsha, Parshas Re'eh. And you have one of the most blatant contradictions in Chumash, where literally from Pasuk Daled till Pasuk Yud Aleph, Hashem changes his mind. It's one of those things which is very, very blatant. It's very obvious that the Torah is in conflict. Literally from on the same page, from Pasuk Daled to Pasuk Yud Aleph. It's one of the topics that has always intrigued me, so I had the excuse, I had the opportunity, so I did some preparing. And that's what we're going to be touching on. We're going to be learning this discussion about Tzedaka in Parshas Re'eh. I want to say one thing as a stage setter. In our Parsha we have the laws of Shemitah, the laws of the sabbatical, okay, the laws of the seventh year. The laws of Shemitah are found in Chumash, in Vayikra, in Parshas Bahar. But there's a basic difference between the laws of Shemitah that you have in Vayikra and the laws of Shemitah that you have in Dvarim. And the difference is that in Vayikra, the Torah speaks primarily about what's called Hashmatas Karkois, the idea that in the seventh year you're not allowed to use the real estate, you're not allowed to do farming, you're not allowed to do harvesting, and so forth and so on. Even when things grow, they don't belong to you, they belong to everybody, and so forth. In Sefer Devarim, in our Parsha, the Torah adds the mitzvah it's called Hashmatas Ksofim. Hashmatas Ksofim means that if you lend somebody money, and Shemitah comes, and according to most opinions, and Shemitah goes, the debt is erased automatically. I'll say that again. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, certainly in times of the first Beis HaMikdash, if a person borrowed money from you, you lent them money, and Shemitah came and Shemitah left, Shemitah is mashmit ol chayv. All debts are erased. Now there are a number of ways of getting around this. The classic way is to take collateral, take a mashkin, right? In today's day and age, you can't get a loan without a collateral, right? It's called a mortgage, right? Your house is collateral against your loan, or some piece of nichtat leinayit, something that you can't take and run off and hide. If a loan is given with collateral, so then, because the mashkin was taken by the lender, there's no din of Hashmatas Ksofim. It is a very powerful mitzvah. It's a powerful mitzvah because it takes an awful lot of amun in Hashem to practice. Especially as you're going to see momentarily in the Chumash, that the Chumash says, it's a couple of days before Shemitah, and someone comes, lend me a couple of dollars, and you say, lend you the money today, it's flushing it down the toilet. So the Eibishter says you have to trust the Eibishter. And this is a very, very significant and powerful mitzvah. And there's great meaning to the fact that this halacha of Hashmatas Ksofim, this idea that when the seventh year comes and the seventh year goes, all loans are erased, applied only in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. And it only applied when all the Jewish people lived in the land. Once the 10 tribes, once the Aseret Hashvatim were exiled, the laws of Hashmatas Ksofim no longer applied. The Chachamim brought it back. Chachamim said that they should apply Hashmatas Ksofim nowadays. And then the Chachamim decided that it wasn't realistic. So the Chachamim added what's called a pruzbul. A pruzbul means another way out of the Shemitah year, annulling all debts. This is the discussion that we have in our Parsha. The Parsha talks about Shemitah, and in conjunction with talking about Shemitah, it talks about Tzedaka. One more thing about Tzedaka that you need to know, which I'm really not going to be exploring so much tonight, but the time will come. And that is that there are two basic categories in Tzedaka. The lower category is called Tzedaka. Tzedaka means charity. You give a person money. The higher category of Tzedaka is called Gemilas Chasadim. Gemilas Chasadim means you do a person a favor. The distinction between Tzedaka and Gemilas Chasadim is Tzedaka is to give a person money, and the person uses the money for his needs. In Gemilas Chasadim, you lend the person money, and the person is intent on paying it back. It's much more honorable. And the Gemara says that tzedakah is for poor people. Gemilas chasadim is bein la'aniyim, bein la'ashiyim. Wealthy people also need to borrow money. And according to Torah, gemilas chasadim is yosim and tzedakah. Lending a person money is considered a greater act of tzedakah than actually giving the person the money outright. And in the classes that we've had over the years, I talked about it. If a person asks you for $100, you give them $100. You give them the $100 and it's over. If a person asks you for $100 and I'm paying it back, and you give them the $100, until that debt is paid, you're connected to that person. It's sometimes easier just to give the money away than to expect to get the money back. And al pi Torah, it's a bigger mitzvah to lend money and take it back. You know why? Because if you lend money and you don't take it back, you don't lend again. You know, a lot of people here are very young, so you don't know how loans work. When you come for a loan, they want to have an udab, they want to have a guarantor. And somebody who's actually going to pay the debt if you don't pay it. And you think, why is he being so mean? Why can't he trust me? And the answer is because he wants to lend money to you, and he wants to lend money to another person, and to another person, to another person. Because each time you lend money, you're doing another mitzvah. And Gemilas Chasadim is dafke, is emphatically when you give the money and you expect it back. It's not cruel. It's respectful. It's respectable. So these two mitzvahs, tzedakah and Gemilas Chasadim. So now we're going to read the Chumash, and we'll take it from there. Okay? So the pasuk begins Dalet, Ephes. Ephes means, what does Ephes mean? However, or but, or emphasis. Ki la yeh b'cha evyin. There will not be amongst you poor people. Ki varech yivracha Hashem, God Almighty is going to bless you. Ba'aretz, on the land, asher adeshem elakecha neisem lecha nachal, that Hashem gives you as an inheritance, l'rishta, for you to conquer and to inherit. So the pasuk predicts that there are not going to be any poor people. There's not going to be any poor people. You're not going to have to worry about giving a loan and not being able to collect it, because no poor people. The Torah predicts that Yidden are going to have no poor people. The rule is, however, you have to listen to the words of the Eibishter. Lishmet, to guard, which goes on Leisaseh. Lasa is to do, which goes on Mitzvah Saseh. It's called HaMitzvah Zeh, all of the commandments that Hashem commands us today. And he continues, you recognize these psukim from V'yitem L'cha, Moshe Rabbeinu Pashat copied them over from the Alter Rebbe Siddur. Ki Hashem Elokecha Berachacha, God Almighty blesses you, Kashadi B'loch, as He spoke about you. V'havatat Goyim Rabim, you will lend money to many peoples, V'ata Lo Yisavit, and you will not borrow. U'mashalta B'Goyim Rabim, you will rule many peoples, V'chol Lo Yimshel, and they won't rule you. I just want you to know, the word V'havatat does not mean to lend and to borrow. It means to take a mashke, take collateral. But the assumption is that there is an avot, there is a collateral when there is a loan. You understand? So when it says v'havatata, it means when you're going to take a mashkin because you've given a loan. And then Pasuk Zayin continues, Ki yeh b'cha evyin, if perhaps there will be amongst you poor people, me'achad sharecha, and one of your me'achad achecha, one of your brothers, ba'achad sharecha, one of your gates. In the land that the Shem Elokecha Neisim Loch, that God Almighty gives you. Do not harden your heart. Do not clench your fist. From your brother, the poor person. You have to open. And the double lashon pasayach tiftach means multiple times. As Yadacha, your hand light to him. You should lend him what he needs to sustain himself, which he is lacking. And I'm sure you know what Chazal say, you have no obligation to make a person wealthy. Deimach means what he needs. And what does a person need? That depends on the person. If a person had once been very wealthy and Nebuch fell on hard times, Deimach is the lifestyle to which he was accustomed. If a person was poor, Deimach is to sustain that standard. I'm warning you. You can have a thought in your heart, bliyal. Bliyal is no good. In Rashi it says that bliyal is a term that denotes avodah zarah, idol worship. In one of the versions it says bliyal means bli aliyah. You don't want to lift yourself to a higher madriga of avodas Hashem. Layman. And you're going to tell yourself as follows. Karva Shnasa Sheva. Shemitah is coming. Shnasa Shemitah, the Shemitah year. And your eyes are going to become negative towards your brother who is poor. Why? Because you know that if you lend the money now, there's a great possibility you're never going to see it again. Well, they see to him like, you don't want to give him. And they make all kinds of pretenses, they tell him stories, excuses, I don't have, the money is locked up. He's going to call to Hashem about you, and this will constitute a sin. Give him, and again it says a double lashon nosein. Don't even feel bad that you're basically flushing your money down the toilet. Give it to him with a good heart. It is because of this matter that you give tzedaka, and you even give loans in a circumstance where there's a possibility you won't be able to reclaim them. Almighty blesses you in all of your deeds, in all of your endeavors, all of your efforts, all of your investments. You should know that the word biglau is interpreted by some like the word galgal. To indicate the idea that panasa and hatzlacha is a galgal achayzin. It's a wheel of fortune that spins, and it's a good idea to stay on top. And therefore you should give tzedakah. Now comes the pasuk. Ki lo yechtal evyay mikerav haaretz. There will never be a point where there will be no poor people on the land. Al kain, therefore, I command you as follows: open up your hand, your hand lachicha, to your brother, lamiyecha, who is impoverished, ulav yorecha, who is even more poor, ba'atzecha, in your land. So, any person with rudimentary knowledge of Hebrew sees a contradiction, right? On page 1, it says in pasuk daled, "Efes ki lo yeh b'cha evyin," there will be no poor people. And in pasuk Yiralav, the Eibush says, "Ki lo yechtal evyin mikerav haaretz." There will never be a point where there will not be rich and poor. No contradiction, right? Huh? It's pretty obvious. And I don't know why I have, as a child even, I always was consumed by this little contradiction in Rashi, especially considering it's not like you have a pasuk in Pashas B'Shalach and a pasuk in Pashas Ve'ei. It's literally the same sequence of psukim. It's one of the most direct parts of Torah that talk about the mitzvah of tzedakah. Tzedakah is such an important mitzvah. This is one of the most powerful places. And from the beginning to the end, he starts off saying, you don't have to worry, there's not going to be any poor Jews. And he says, there are always going to be poor Jews, so make sure to give loans. This is the question that our class is going to revolve around, in addition to the fact that obviously we're going to be talking about tzedakah. And I want to do this a little bit out of order. Okay, I'm going to ask all of you to turn to page 10. Okay, all the pages are numbered at the bottom. Okay, this is an Abarbanel, or an Abarbanel, depending on your pronunciation. The left side of the page. I am reading this Abarbanel as an introduction to the class. This is not a direct part of the class. This is a stage setter, if you will, to the class. Okay? The Abarbanel says something very interesting. And I'm going to tell you the point of the Abarbanel, and then, as is the custom of this class, we're going to read the text. To be a Jew takes faith. It goes without saying. You have to believe, right? We can eat, sleep, and be merry, and instead we daven and we learn and we do mitzvahs and we cut of other people. Why? Because we believe that there's an Eibishter, there's a Creator. There's a higher purpose. There's also a higher responsibility, and we want to conform. We want to commit. I'll give you several. To commit ourselves to this higher standard, to this higher avodah in our personal lives. How frum one is should be, and I suppose it is, a direct reflection of how much faith one has. The more you believe, the greater trust you have in Hashem, and the greater trust you have in Hashem, the more you're able to serve Hashem at the expense of yourself. Right? The Eilik of Baal Shem Tov was not able to sleep at night if there was money in his house. Why? Because keeping money in his house overnight to him meant that he didn't trust that tomorrow the Eibusher was going to give him money again. So his daughter, who was a very holy woman, had Rabbanis Odel. The Rebbe's Baal Shem Tov's daughter, her name was Odel. And the reason her name was Odel is because Odel is an abbreviation. Eish, Das, Lamei. Baal Shem Tov said he took her neshama from the Torah. Imagine having a daughter that took your neshama from the Torah, Odel. And she needed money early in the morning, so she kept some money around. She didn't tell her father. And the father says, I can't sleep. There's money in the house. The Baal Shem Tov couldn't sleep if there was any, what was called in Lashon Chazal, pas b'saleh. If you paid attention to last week's chitas, you read about the mun. Right? The mun was such a bracha. And the pasuk calls it a test. It's Manasseh. If you read last week's Pasha, it says that the mun was a test. The question becomes, how could the mun be a test? You did nothing for your parnassah. It came to you literally from heaven. And if you were lucky, it landed by your front door. Not only that, there was no waste. The mun was the perfect food. It was nivla by vodem. It produced no waste. It was mamish, pure minerals and vitamins with malachim. It was food for malachim. And it was a test. What was the test? The cabinets were bare. There was no food for a rainy day. There was no such thing as a resource, as a reservoir. There was no such thing as a just in case. You understand? There was no such thing. And there was a certain element of trust. When you finish up the mun, you literally had no food till the Eibusher was going to feed you personally again. And you waited for the food. The food didn't come. You just continued to wait. So that was the test. The Heilige Baal Shem Tov's emunah was in such a high madrege that if somebody did something near him that indicated a limit in emunah, but to keep money, we have money in bank accounts and in all kinds of investments and security accounts and so forth. The Baal Shem Tov couldn't keep money because it was a simon that he didn't trust that every day Hashem was going to provide for that day. Because the Baal Shem Tov's emunah, the Baal Shem Tov's bitachon, the expectation upon the Baal Shem Tov, the assumed standard of the Baal Shem Tov was such that he wasn't allowed to even make a keli and tel of a parnassah. It had to come every day new from the Meibusher. This is the Baal Shem Tov. We are not the Baal Shem Tov. So we can't live that way. So the rule is like this. The holier we are, the more betachon we have to have. The greater Hashem assumes us to be, and the greater his expectation of us. For example, in Eretz Yisrael, there's laws of Shemitah, of a sabbatical, right? What does Shemitah mean? Once in 7 years, there's no harvest. Think about it. Imagine if you're a farmer, once in 7 years, no food. That's it, no food. What am I going to eat? Man ben Hashemayim. Last year's food, next year's food, the Eibishter's food. In Eretz Yisrael, there's halachas of Shemitah. Why? Eretz Yisrael is the holier land. A Jew is closer to Hashem. It's easier to see the hand, the miracles of God Almighty. And Hashem expects us to have so much emunah and betachon that once in the Shemitah, there's no parnassah. It's awesome. When you think about Shemitah, when you don't think about it, it doesn't bother you. We go to Israel, our problem with Shemitah is what fruits can I eat? But if you happen to be a fruit farmer, once in 7 years you don't have fruit. And the non-frum farmers are farming and harvesting anyway. So you're nebuch between a rock and a hard place. This is an unbelievable betachon emunah in the Eibusher. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, when Kol Yoshveha Aleha, that means to say not only Jews lived in Israel, but all the Jewish people lived in Israel, there was even a higher standard. And the higher standard was the one we're reading in our Pasha. That not only are we not allowed to harvest the land once in a sabbatical, every 7 years all debts were erased. Unbelievable. People borrowed money from you, Shemitah came, Shemitah went, finished, we're friends, nothing happened. How much betachon do you have to have in Hashem that the bread you eat comes from Him and not from your earning power? Could you imagine you earn money, and people work very hard to earn money, you give it to a person, he doesn't pay it back, and he doesn't know it to you. Why not? What do you mean, why? The parnassah didn't come from him. The parnassah didn't come from you and your hard work. The parnassah came from Hashem. Hashem provided. He's going to continue to provide. The proof that you believe that Hashem provides, and you're not going to ask Him for the money. It takes an enormous amount of betach. That's the gist of it. That's the essence of it. And like I said to you, there's basically 3 standards. There's the Chutz La'aretz standard, there's the Eretz Yisrael standard, and there's Bizman Shakol Yoshveha Aleha, which only existed in time of the first Beis HaMikdash till about 100 years before the Churban, when all 12 Shvatim, or at least the vast majority, live in the Holy Land. The first standard expects to have betachon and emunah in the Eibusher, but not that once in 7 years you don't work. In Eretz Yisrael there's Shemitah. Once in 7 years there's no harvest. And when Kol Yisrael, once in 7 years all debts are erased. So the Abarbanel talks about this. And I'm showing you the left side of the page, page 10. Okay? Kvar Kosafti, says the Abarbanel, I've already written, Shabahu ha-mitzvahs ha'ela b'kan b'madregah. These mitzvahs are enumerated in a gradation, in steps, from the easiest to the more difficult. That im heyes kula, though all of them are misug ha-nedivus uminov, they all involve nedivus. What does nedivus mean? Generosity, giving, benevolence. There's levels. Level number 1, Kirishayna. The first level is Tziva al HaMaiser Sheni. The second tithe. A Jewish person harvested, so the first Maiser went to the Levi. The second harvest, second Maiser, went to him. He kept it, but you had to eat it in Yerushalayim. Okay? It's not that difficult to take 10% of what you earn and eat it on vacation, basically. You imagine 10% of your earnings you have to take. You have to spend it on vacation. You have to take it to Yerushalayim and make a feast and a party and invite guests and relatives and friends and the poor and make a feast. It's still an inconvenience. You'd rather invest the money in something else. Tabor says 10% of your earnings you have to eat in Yerushalayim. A higher standard. Then it talks about the tithe that you have to give to the aniyim, to the poor people, which was done during the cycle of years, the 3rd year and the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle. Ma'aser Sheni was applicable the 1st year and the 2nd year, the 4th year and the 5th year, and Ma'aser Ani was applicable the 3rd year and the 6th year. This tithe you separated and you gave it to poor people. Shehu Ma'aser Sheni HaNifrash, it's the second tithe, has it separated. Bashana Shlish is the 3rd and the 6th year. That's more difficult to do. Why? You're separating 10% of your earnings and you're giving it to somebody else. Shunasan Kulalanim was given to poor people. Then the Torah commands us the laws of the sabbatical, which is even more difficult. That's even more difficult. That a human being should give. Okay? Not just a tithe, 10%. Even the 80% or whatever it is, the 78% or the 77% which you're allowed to keep, you lend it to a person, and the person is supposed to give it back. That you wait for the borrower to pay you back for a long time, and then Shemitah comes, and Shemitah goes, can't ask for it. You lose it. This is even a more difficult level of Amun and B'tachin. To have Amun and B'tachin and take 10% of what you earn and eat it in Yerushalayim is one thing. To take 10% of what you have and give it away to a poor person is another. But the money that's yours, to lend it to a person with the intent of getting it back, and he just waits a couple of days too long, Shemitah comes, Shemitah goes, the debt is paid, debt is off. And the last thing is, the last pasha is the pasha of the very poor person, Shehi Tzedaka. This is called giving charity. Charity means giving without the intent of ever getting it back. The Abarbanel claims that tzedakah is even more difficult. It's always applicable. It doesn't only have a season, and you're never going to see the money again, and so forth. So the Abarbanel says that tzedakah is a greater sacrifice than Gemilas Chasadim. Notwithstanding what I said to you in the introduction, there are those who say that there's certainly greater connection between the borrower and the lender in a halva, in a loan, than between a noisin and a makabel, between a giver and a receiver of tzedakah. This is the introduction. That the Torah has more and more, higher and higher, deeper and deeper expectation of us, and it really comes down to betachin. The more betachin we have, the easier it is for us to do mitzvahs that cost, that have a price. Right? The Rebbe once said it if I bring it. The more betachin a yid has at the Eibishter, the easier it is for a person to give more. And the truth is that when we have more betachin in Hashem and we serve Hashem with greater mesiras nefesh, we see miracles. We see the hand of Hashem to a greater extent. There's a famous story which I don't want to talk to you about for too long, but the holy Lubavitcher, the Heilige Lubavitcher, was informed that the miser died. It's a famous story. It was a very, very wealthy Jew in Lubavitcher who never gave tzedakah. Never. Very, very wealthy. Never gave any tzedakah. And they came to the Lubavitcher and said, you hear, the rich miser died. Yeah, the miser died. I'm going to his funeral. And please announce to everybody in town that I'm going to his funeral. I want the people to know. People hear that the Heilige Lubavitcher is going to his Levaya, so who's not going to go? So the whole city accompanied this miser. And after the funeral, they came to the Baal Shem Tov, and they said to the Baal Shem Tov, says, Rebbe, the man was so wealthy. And he was such a miser. He was so mean. He was so insensitive. He was so without a heart. And you went to his funeral, and in your honor, the whole community, what's the chutzpah does he have? So the Badishva says, I don't know how much of a miser he was. I met him on 3 occasions, he says. And each time was by a din teira. And it was because of these 3 din teira that I decided to go to his funeral. And he tells them 3 stories. I'll make it bekitzer. I can tell the story for 20 minutes. I don't have 20 minutes. I don't even know if you have, but I for sure don't have. He says there was a woman whose husband was never chala yutlach. He was useless, couldn't make a living. And he thought he was a tailor, whatever, he was a professional of some sort, a uman yad, some kind of a craftsperson. He figures he'll go out into the world and try his luck. It's not working yet, it's full. It says memory full. So he tells his wife that he's working for this rich guy, and that every Friday she should go into him and he'll give her money. And when he returns, he's going to pay him back. The whole thing was a mamish ababamais, had absolutely no credibility. He disappears. He figures his wife will show up Friday and she'll find out there's nothing to eat and she'll make a hysterics and someone will have mercy on her. He didn't think she was going to die. And you come back and she'll hit him with a broom, but then there'll be panasa. She shows up at this man's office on Friday and she's asking for money. And the secretary says, I don't know who you are, and she makes a big deal, and the boss comes out, and I forgot to tell you, write her down every Friday, give her the money. Anyway, a year later he shows up, he's expecting his wife is going to rip him in shreds, and the house is so peaceful and so calm, and he says to her, how's everything? Oh, you made such good arrangements, I went every Friday. He was shocked. Because this was Mr. Miser, he didn't give 2 nickels to Tzedaka. So he comes to his office and he storms into the place and says, I owe you all this money. He says, excuse me, I don't even know who you are. You gave my wife food every Friday. I don't know you, I never met you. I have no business with you. Get out of my office. Anyway, he argues back and forth. I owe you money and you were so kind, you didn't have to do it, and I tricked my wife and so on. I don't know. Anyway, there was a whole big argument. He wants to give him the money, refuses to take it. They went to the Badishva and the Rav Paskin that he should give it, but he doesn't have to take it. The money could go to the stuff. It was the first din teira. The second din teira was about a Jew who came to town and lost several hundred rubles that he had borrowed for investment purposes. And when he saw that the money was gone, he fainted. Someone stole it, but someone pickpocketed it. This was money that he could never pay back. Never. Impossible in his lifetime. And they wake him up and he faints. The rich man hears about it. So he goes over to this fellow and says, tell me, you lost your wallet. How much money was in it and in what denominations? And it tells him that they had so many hundreds and so many 50s and so many 5s and so many 1s. He goes home, takes exactly that money, puts it into an old wallet, and he brings him here, I found your money. Gives him the money. The Ganef sees this. The actual thief witnesses this. So he feels so terrible, he comes to the rich man and says, listen, I stole the money. Here's the money. He said, I don't know you, get out of my life. So he went to the din teira to write this in the Badishva, and again the Badishva had to paskin. And the third time was the most interesting story of all. A man comes and wants to borrow money. He says, when are you going to pay it back? In 6 months, in a year. What happens if you don't pay the money? I need an order, I need a guarantor. I don't have, so I can't give you the money. Okay, the Abish will be my guarantor. The Abish, that's a good guarantor. Sure, gives him the loan. A year later he comes back and he wants to pay him the loan. He says, the order paid already. The guarantor already delivered the geld. You don't owe me the money. So Evan had a din teira. But Ditcher said that for these 3 din teiras, he went to his Levaya. So in other words, things are not always as they appear, evidently. In any case. Now, sorry?
You said something about the Rebbe once said
Yeah, because it got distracted.
That, what did I say the Rebbe said about Abarbanel? Now, so let's get to the topic at hand, beginning with Rashi. Go back to page 1. The question again is, in Pasuk Dalet it says that Lo Yeh B'cha Evyin, there will not be amongst you any poor people. And in Pasuk Yud Aleph it says Ki Lo Yechtal Avyin Mikerev Aretz. There will never be a point where there won't be somebody that's poor. There will always be poor people. Okay? So we're going to begin actually in an unusual place. Let's look at Yenuzim and Azil, page 2. I said 1, look to page 2. Yenuzim and Azil is the oldest work of Torah Shemapeh that exists. It was written well before the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. It's the oldest holy book that we possess. It's not in the Tanakh. It predates the Mishnah, it predates the Zohar. It was written by the Yenuzim and Azil, who was the Talmidim of Hillel. So we're going to read page 2. The Yenuzim and Azil is at the top of the page. Pasuk Dalet. L'choyt. Only. Okay, it's a different Aramaic, so hopefully I'll translate it correctly. In atun asikin b'mitzvasa de'iraisa. If you will be occupied in the mitzvahs of the Torah, lo yeheve b'choyin maskina. There will not be amongst you maskina. Maskina means in context poor people. That means vulnerable people. Arum because beracha yivarchecho na Hashem, God Almighty will bless you. Ba'ara on the land that Hashem alekacha, that God your God Yahav l'chayin gave to you, achasana as an inheritance, lemeta that you should inherit it. So Yenuzim and Azil says that if Jewish people learn Torah and do mitzvahs, there won't be any poor people. Now let's go to page 4 and let's read what Yenuzim and Azil has to say about Pasuk Yud Aleph. Arum. However, mitul, if the loitzais in Beis Yisrael b'mitzvasa de'iraisa, Jewish people are not particular about doing mitzvahs, loipaskin maskinin. There will not be an interruption of vulnerable, of needy, of dependent people. We don't have, page 6 is the Gemara, so you just have to trust. The rest of the pasuk continues in kind. So the Yenuzim and Azil says, what a lot of Mefarshim say, as we see momentarily, that it's up to us. The Eibishter says, if we do Torah mitzvahs, there will not be any poor people. If we don't do Torah mitzvahs, there will always be poor people. There's no way in a community like ours, a community of Jews, that just by happenstance, just by nature taking its course, they won't be rich and poor. There will always be poor people. If, however, Jewish people all serve the Eibishter, there will be no dependency. This is what the Targum Yenuzim ben Yosef says. Now, Rashi, page 1. Rashi says essentially the same thing. So let's do it quick. Page 1. Daled. Efes ki lo yeh b'cha evyin. Efes. I don't know how to translate the word Efes. However, emphasis, exclusively. But some commentaries say Efes means no. It's never going to happen. Ki lo yeh b'cha. You'll see. In Pasuk Yud Aleph it's written, ki lo yechtal evyin. There will never be an interruption of poverty. And in this pasuk it says there won't be any poverty at all. Ella, the answer is, Bizman sha'atim oisim b'tzayni shal mokim. If you do the will of the Eibishter, evyoinim ba'achedim, there will be poor people amongst others, v'loi b'chem, not amongst you. Uk'she'ein atim oisim b'tzayni shal mokim. If God forbid we fail to do the will of the Eibishter, evyoinim b'chem, then has Hashem, there's going to be poor people amongst the Jewish people. So superficially, Rashi is saying exactly the same thing as Yenuzim and Azil. If all Jews are from, and by the way, just for the record, from involves two basic components. Bein Adam Lamokim and Bein Adam Lachavere. And from means we do both halves, not we decide that we're pious in one area, we're pious in the other. We're full Yidden, we have fine midas, and we also serve and connect to Hashem. There won't be any poverty. I want you just to know what Chassidus says. This expression, Oisim Ritzoynoi Shel Mokim, appears in the Shas, in the Gemara, in numerous places. There are many cases where the Gemara observes contradiction, and the Gemara says, Kan b'shah she'yisrael oisim b'tzayni shel mokim, Kan b'shah she'ein yisrael oisim b'tzayni shel mokim. Here the Jewish people are doing the will of Hashem, and here they aren't. So the Chassidus translates, oisim b'tzayni shel mokim doesn't simply mean doing Hashem's will. Oisim b'tzayni shel mokim means creating Hashem's will. Kan b'shah she'yisrael oisim b'tzayni shel mokim. They serve Hashem on such a high level that they create a new will in Hashem. Kan b'shah she'ein Yisrael oisim b'tzayni shel mokim. That means they're from. They do mitzvahs, but not on a level of b'chol moedecha, not on a level of oisim b'tzayni shel mokim, where they're creating, so to speak, a new will in their Eibishter. So if it's not oisim b'tzayni shel mokim, even if they do the mitzvahs, but there isn't this deep level of intensity, which is called creating the will of the Eibishter, so then it's possible, simply by the forces of nature, simply by the normal order of things, that there should be rich and poor. Okay? This is Rashi. What's next? Even Ezra. Even Ezra's page 2. And I should have arrowed it. Okay, you could see that I scribbled everywhere, but I didn't arrow it. Even Ezra is on page 2. It's the right side of the page by the Dalet. I hope you can find it, because I usually like to indicate it. I simply forgot to. Okay? And he says, Ephes, however, Hatam, the way you read these words are as follows. That you should know. This that I commanded you, that you should not oppress your brother. This is called when you're collecting a debt. When somebody owes you money and you want your money back, what do? You nudge. Right? It's called nudge. It's called agasa. You harass the person. If it is leisiges, you're not allowed to bother the person. Which is why, if the person gave you a mashkin, the person gave you a collateral, there's no halacha of hashmatas ksava, because you don't have to bother him, he has to bother you. He wants his collateral back. You understand? That's the halacha. So leyiges means you're not allowed to bother a person for the loan once Shemitah comes and goes. Says Even Ezra, ein tzedek, it will not be necessary. Im hayu kol Yisrael erubam, if all, or even the majority of Jews are shoymim b'koil Hashem, listen to Hashem's voice, as, under those circumstances, lo yeh b'cha evin, there'll be nobody poor, shu tzarech liyescha malve oisei, that you would need to lend him money. Na kulchem tavaytu goyim rabim, you will all lend money to goyim. And Even Ezra tells you what I told you earlier, that the word avoit doesn't mean borrow and lend, it actually means to take a collateral. V'atam tikchu avoite, the word tavoite means taking a mashkin, taking a lateral for the bavur hamam and shetitun, for the money that you're giving. So Even Ezra says more or less the same thing as Rashi. He agrees with Rashi that it is possible in the real world that there should be a moment in the history of the Jewish people that one Jew should be dependent. In the words of the Targum, there shouldn't be one Jew that's miskin, not one Jew that's vulnerable, that's one Jew that's needy. If we're good people. Even Ezra says even more than Rashi. It doesn't even require all of us to be good people. It's sufficient if the majority of us are good people. This is what the Even Ezra adds. Right? Yes, ma'am.
In that case, how come there are big tzaddikim who are so poor?
We'll talk about that. Yeah, that's mentioned in some of the Mefarshim. Point well taken. Turn to page 4. Ramban. Okay, the Ramban says it the way it is. Ramban, Mitamol, gets practical. This Ramban is more typical of an Even Ezra. The Ramban says, it's possible in theory that all Jews should be tzaddikim, and there should be no dependent class. Every Jew should be self-sufficient. But it's possible only in theory. In reality, there will always be Jews who are not tzaddikim, and therefore there will always be poor people. That's how he reads the psukim. Ephes, there is a remote possibility. There's a hypothetical. Theoretically, if all Yidden are tzaddikim, there won't be a dependent class. But there will always be poor people. Let's read the Ramban. V'hanochoin, page 4, the left side. I don't know how to describe Ramban to you. It's one group of small illegible letters. I can lend you my glasses, but then I won't be able to see. This is the Ramban, right here. This is the Ramban, okay? The correct interpretation is that he's trying to say, there will never be a point where there's no poor people. That it's impossible that such a thing should happen ever. Okay? Why is Hashem saying, I guarantee you, it's never going to happen that there won't be poor people? I thank you, that sounds very encouraging. I thank you very much, Eibishter, for the honesty. Right? We keep honesty for ourselves. Since in Pasuk Dalet he promised, there won't be any poor people. If all Jews keep all the mitzvahs. So now the Eibishter says, listen, I told you that if you all keep all the mitzvahs, there won't be any poor people. And I stand by that. The problem is, Aval Yodaiti, but I know, Ki lo yihiyu kol HaDa'as, kol yimei olam, kulam shemim kol ha-mitzvahs. In no generation, from now till the end of time, is it going to be a generation of Jews who are so pious and so righteous that they won't be rich and poor. This is what he says. Actually, it's Tarach Klal, it's Avos Allah Evyin, they will not at all need this mitzvah of looking after poor people. How do you want to read this Ramban? The Ramban is being discouraging, the Ramban is being uncharacteristically negative or realistic. This sounds more Even Ezra-like. If you understand the personalities of the Rishonim, Even Ezra is always so logical, so down to earth. But this is what the Ramban says. The Torah says Ephes. In theory, it's possible that Lo Yeh B'Cho Evyin, but the Torah says Kila Yechtel. I hate to say it. In reality, it's not going to happen. So the Ramban is different than the Even Ezra and Rashi. Right? What's next? Sforno. And the Sforno begins on page 2. By the way, this is finger exercise. After the class, your fingers will be stronger. That's part of the idea. Okay? Page 2 at the very, very bottom of the page on the left side. Page 2 at the very, very bottom of the page on the left side. It says, Efes kilayiyah b'cho evya. Af al pi shamati. Though I told you, shetishamet yotcha, that when Shemitah comes and Shemitah goes, loans are erased and have to be repaid. Hine. Behold, loi, turn to page 4. Loi yikeh b'chem eiz aleve shetistarach l'shamit. It's going to happen. In fact, says the Sforno, that there will simply be no borrowers. Every Jew is going to have sufficient parnasa, and he won't need another Jew. And the Sforno says the most powerful thing of all. He tells you when it actually occurred. V'zeh b'li safek niskayim. This happened. B'doir boyei ha'aretz. The Jews who entered the Holy Land. Kol yemei ha'Yeshua, as long as Yeshua lived. V'chol yemei ha'askenim, as long as the elders ha'sharicha yamim achri Yeshua that lived beyond Yeshua's lifetime. Jews were frum. All of them. They lived in the real world. They weren't living in a cloud eating man min hashamayim, and no Jew borrowed from another. So this actually occurred. But it occurred only then. And if you wanted to play a little cutting and pasting, you could say that the Ramban would be a very good tandem with the Sforno. It happened, but it's never happening again. It happened in historic times, it happened in the times of Yeshua, which is after the Chumash was written, but immediately after. And since that time, the Torah says, Ki lo yechta. There'll always be poor people, because there'll always be somebody or some group of people that could be more pious and righteous. And of course it doesn't mean us, because we're the most pious and righteous people in the world, as everybody knows. Okay. Now, let me see what to do next. I am slightly aware of the clock. Only slightly, but I am slightly aware of the clock. Okay. Now, let's move along to the Gemara. The Gemara is on page 6. Okay, I hope you can read it. I made an arrow on the right side of your page and on the left side of your page. This is one of the most familiar Gemaras. I must tell you, this Gemara is a classic, a truly classic Gemara. And I would be totally remiss if I had not included this. It would be a big infraction. It would be a big aveda. The Gemara tells a story. You see what I'm reading? It's near the top of the page. This is a Masechta Bava Basra, which has a whole discussion that goes on for many pages about Tzedaka. And the Gemara says as follows: V'zu Shaila, this question, that show to Nesrupus Harashas Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was asked this question by the evil Roman officer of some category, some status, I don't know what he was, whose name was Turnusrupus. If God Almighty loves poor people, why doesn't He feed them? In other words, typical Roman, if they're suffering, let them suffer. They deserve it. They're losers. They're not chavremans. Oh, Malay! So Rabbi Akiva answered Turnusrupus. They make them poor, so we shouldn't go to Gehenna. Send the copies on, please. Okay. Amalei. So Turnusrupus says to Rebbe Akiva again in typical Roman fashion. It's reminiscent of Sadoy, Republicans to the extreme. I earned it fair and square, don't take my money. You don't have, suffer. Work hard. Oh, you don't know how to make a living, you're losing, so that's your problem. That's the way it works. So real world, right, this is America. What do they call it? Individual rights, individual opportunity. I take care of me. I don't steal from anybody, but I don't give to nobody. In Sadoy, this was taken to an extreme. This was a Roman officer who had the same culture, the same philosophy that said, people who are downtrodden, they're supposed to be an underclass. Why should I help them? Let them suffer. He says, the fact that they're poor is proof that they're worthy of Gehenna. Maybe she doesn't like him. He made them poor. So why are you redeeming them from a suffering which God Almighty imposed upon them? Obviously because it's warranted, because they deserve it. It's just. So Tanasrupas gives Rabbi Akiva a mashal. Listen to the exchange carefully. What's his analogous to? A king of the flesh. He gets angry at his servant. He incarcerates. He puts him in jail. And he gave instructions regarding him. Nobody should feed him. Nobody should give him water. And let him suffer. So what happened? There was one weakling, one person who didn't have a tough Roman spine and he couldn't watch a person suffer. And helplessly he fed him. One man went, gave him to eat and gave him to drink. The king hears about it, he's not going to get angry. The king said, don't feed him. The king said, let him suffer. Why did you give him to eat? All of a sudden he became the rabbi and a scholar and a Talmudist. It says in your Torah you're called Hashem's servants. Shenemar, and the pasuk says, the Jewish people are my slaves. So why are you feeding those who Hashem personally impoverished? Rabbi Akiva answers him, I'll answer you with an analogy. What is this analogous to? It's the fourth of the middle lines. A king of the flesh, circled, who got angry not at a servant but at his son. He puts him in jail. And he gave instructions regarding him. Don't give him to eat, don't let him to drink, let him suffer. One man went, and he fed him, and he gave him water. The king here, that somebody took mercy on his son, who he was so mean to that he prohibited anybody else from feeding. What's he going to do? He's not going to thank him and send him a gift for violating his instructions and feeding his son. It says, Vanan Kriyim Banim, Rabbi Akiva tells Tunasubas, we're Hashem's children. The Ksiv, as the pasuk says, we're Hashem's children. Okay? All my lies that Tunasubas was a bigger scholar than you think. You think he gave up so easy? Rabbi Akiva says we're Hashem's children. And when Hashem is angry at his child, he still wants us to look after him. Tunasubas says we're Hashem's slaves. When Hashem punishes a slave, he wants him to languish and to suffer. So Tunasubas now answers Rabbi Akiva as follows. You are in fact called Hashem's children, but you also called Hashem's slaves. What's the rule? Notice that same phrase. When you create the will of Hashem, or on a basic level, do the will of Hashem, you call Hashem's children. When, however, you do not do the wishes of the Rebbe, you're called his slaves. Says the Roman, at this particular juncture, you're not doing the will of Hashem because the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and you become vassals, you become puppets, you become slaves, subordinates to the Romans. So clearly Hashem doesn't like you because you're not doing His wishes, and therefore you're slaves. And when you're slaves, and Hashem said, let them starve, you're not supposed to feed them. Amalei says Rabbi Akiva, the pasuk says, Halei preis lerav lachmech. The Torah says, extend your bread to the hungry. And people who are extremely poor, bring them, invite them into your home. Okay? When are Jewish people so impoverished and called aniyim merudim, poor and abused? Now, in the times of Galus. The Torah says, feed him anyway. This is the Gemara. This is one of the most famous Gemaras, really. But Rabbi Akiva says the Eibush to make poor people, so the rich people should support him. That's why. And to the Srupis talks to him about equity, about republicanism, right? About lowering taxes, right? And let the poor people worry about themselves. So Rabbi Akiva the Eibush to made poor for the rich, Ganedi, for the rich, Elam Haba. And to the Srupis says, what do you mean? They have it coming to them. So Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't make a difference. Even if you're right and they have it coming to them, the Eibush says, feed them anyway. This is the Gemara. This is the Gemara. Now, there's so much more in here and there's no time left. So the next is the Yalkut. Page 7 and page 8 is the Yalkut Shemaini, which you're going to do on your own. Okay? Let's do page 9 now, the Riva. The good news about the Riva is that it's very abbreviated, it's very concise. Listen to this. Okay, listen to his interpretation. It's a very nice pshat. If you can do two things at once, right? Everybody has, Baruch Hashem, 5 fingers. So hold on to page 9 and at the same time go back to page 1. Okay? Do two. I know it's complicated, but I think it's manageable. Top of the page. Chumash. V'zeh dvar hashmita. This is the law of the sabbatical. Shamit. You should erase. Kol baal. Shamit, you should interrupt. Kol baal mashayodeh. All people who are demanding their loans back from somebody else. This is Isra of Layigis, who was trying to collect. Ashayasha Bereyehu was collecting his debts from his fellow. Layigis Bereyehu. Stop pursuing the lender. Ve'esachav and his brother, Kikara, Shemitah Lav Hashem, the Eibush that announced that now with Shemitah, don't ask for the money back, period, the end. As a Nachli Tigis, when you lend money to a goy and Shemitah comes, you can collect it from him. V'asher yilecha sachicha. However, if you lent money to your brother, tashmet yadecha, release your hand. The debt is as if it's been paid. Efes, however, there won't be any poor people amongst you. Kivarech yevarech Hashem. God is going to bless. Now go back to page 9. This is how he reads it. We all have a contradiction between two psukim. One pasuk says there will always be poor people, and the Ramban says, let's be realistic. Maybe in theory, in hypothesis, it's possible the Jews should be so pious that there should be no poor people. In reality, there will always be poor people. The Riva says something very simple. There will always be poor people, but you're not going to become poor for doing this mitzvah. Look at the words. Davar achad. Look at my second arrow. Shalei taimer, a person shouldn't say heich asham meit. This is obviously a typo. How am I going to obfuscate? How am I going to drop my debtors, the people who owe me money, as chevasi, my loans that I gave people? V'nimtza shani karev avodeniyas. I'm going to become impoverished by lending people the money and not collecting it. Lekach ne'emar efes. The word efes goes on the lenders. However, kilayir b'chol ha'evin, you will not become poor. Hiftichacha hakosov, the Torah promises, shalei taviacha hashmatas mil v'ladei aniyas. There's no way you will do this mitzvah of lending money and let Shemitah come and go and not collecting it and doing it with a smile. You're never going to become poor from it. So the two psukim are apples and oranges. Pasuk Daled is talking about the idea that you should do the mitzvah of not collecting your debts. And Pasuk Yadav is telling you a matter of fact. There will always be poor people, they're always going to need tzedakah, and they're always going to need milas chasad. So the contradiction is just completely removed because it's apples and oranges. One is addressing the issue of this mitzvah, as costly as it is, it's not going to bring you the day on Niyas. And the other one is talking about the reality that there's always going to be poor people. This is the Riva. Now, there's an Abarbanel, which is very, very long and very, very, very involved. Okay, page 10. We'll do Avart. The Abarbanel here really, I suppose I should say, he does the predictable thing. He says it's he agrees with the Ramban. It's impossible. When you have a nation of people, you have a civilization, you have a community, it cannot be that nobody should be poor. It's just simply impossible. And he translates the word efes as no, not as yes, no. Efes doesn't mean, however, there won't be any poor people. Efes means impossible. Look at what he says. V'amnam amrei efes. You see where I'm reading? Right side of page 10, where the arrow is. When he says Efes Keliyeh B'cha Eved, there won't be any poor people. Kivarech Yevarecha Hashem Alakecha, God Almighty is going to bless you. Pirshu Bey, this means Sheyihiyeh Mikat Hanimna. It is simply logically impossible, and therefore realistically impossible. Shalayiyeh B'hem Eved, there should be no poor people. Kidava Nimna Ve'efes. It cannot be. And he translates the word Efes not as however, but as impossible. Efes as ken nizan. Zero, right? Efes means zero. It is a zero possibility. No many poor people. Kidava nimna v'efesu, it's totally impossible. Shalayeh b'cha evin, they shouldn't have any poor people. Afal pi, even though shabarech yevarecha Hashem is going to bless you, but in a cross section, in a greater society with all the blessings of the Eibishter, there are going to be haves and have-nots. Okay, you have many people. There's so many people, one at least has to be poor. That's why you have to have Shemitah. So he translates the word Efes completely different than everybody else. The Ramban says theoretically it's possible that there should be no poor people, but realistically it's never going to happen. The Abarbanel for the Efes, there's a zero likelihood that Jewish people should be in a state where there isn't poor. Even if they all serve Hashem, and even if He gives them blessings, it's just the nature of a civilization. This is a very logical position, the Abarbanel. It's a natural position. It says in reality, in a society of many people, there has to be a cross-section, has to be all different types. Hashem could make a nest, but that's a nest. Within the framework of normal life, this is impossible. This is the Abarbanel. Now, let's do the Eitz HaDa'as Toiv on page 13. And this leads us to the point that one of the people mentioned to me before. Okay? And he says an interesting thing. Eitz HaDa'as Toiv is Reb Chaim Vital. This was a great makubal. This is the disciple of Arizal who wrote Arizal's writings. This is considered a Pshutei Shal Mikra commentary. It's considered an elementary interpretation, but it's deeply steeped in Kabbalah. And he says, V'omnam. You see what I'm reading? I made 3 arrows, right? I got so excited when I found it. I made 3 arrows, okay? The question is, one pasuk says, the first pasuk says, no, there won't be any poor people. Because the other pasuk says, there will always be poor people. Make up your mind. Eibishter, make up your mind. And between pasuk Dalet and pasuk Yud Aleph, it's pretty hard to forget. It's on the same page in the Sefer Torah. And what does the Gemara answer? That when Jewish people doing the will of Hashem, there won't be any poor people. This is exactly what Rashi says. It says the Eitz HaDa'as the following. He says, the point is that it seems that Parnasa depends on our merits and not on our mazel. I don't know if you know this, but there's a famous Gemara, which is also cited in Chassidus a lot, in Masechta Tainis. Tractate Tainis talks about rain, and rain is synonymous with Parnasa. So the Gemara says in Masechta Tainis that Bon Chayu Mazena, children, health, and Parnasa, Loi B'Zechusa Talia, Ella b'mazla talia. It's not dependent upon schus, it's dependent upon mazel. What's mazel? A long story, not for tonight. Bottom line is, why could you have a tzaddik who's hungry? Because it's mazel, it's not schus. The Gemara Rebbe brings he brings here Rebbe Elazar ben Pedas. Elazar ben Pedas was a big tzaddik, and he was excessively poor. Excessively poor. You know how poor he was? The Gemara says he davened to the Eibishter that he wants to get rich. So the Eibishter says, listen, if you want, I'll erase the world. Take a blackboard, take an eraser, just erase the whole world. I'll start from other munition over again. And maybe when I get to you, you'll be born in a different mazel. You understand? The Elazar ben Pedas was poor. He davens to the Eibishter, I don't want to be poor. Okay, if you want, I'll erase everything. Start from Bereshis. And maybe when it gets to you, you'll be born an hour off, an hour before, an hour later, you'll be in a different mazel. It's a very strange Gemara, and it deserves our attention. We don't have time for it. But it illustrates the point of mazel. There's an element in mazel, let's just say this, which you can't explain. We're not going to say that Hashem is not in charge, Chas v'sholom, but we don't understand how He's in charge. Zechus means the righteous are rewarded, and the opposite of righteous are the opposite of rewarded. Mazel means it's very difficult to figure out. Right? So he says, Kenira, I'm 7 lines from the bottom of the first column, or the third column, Shetaloi b'schus v'lei b'mazal panosim to be dependent upon zechus and not on mazal. V'omna makosal atzmei tirid, and the Torah itself resolves it. V'omrei ulev yenecha ba'artzecha. I'm trying to save time. Bottom line is, there's a difference between Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's how he draws the distinction. And he says, Yitzir, ki bizman hayes Yisrael shluyim b'golos chutz la'oretz. When Jews are exiled outside of the Holy Land, muchrachu, it's imperative shebemazal tal yemil, so it has to do with mazal. Ki b'chutz la'oretz sheltem ha'mazalis, because outside of Israel the mazalis have some kind of influence, afgam al Yisrael, even on the Jewish people, v'yesem sham. It means Hashem one day will get around to talking about mazalis. It's not for today. Hashem is in charge of the mazal too. It's just hard to figure out. When the Jews live on the Holy Land, on the land it gives you, so then, if they do the will of the Eibishter, top of the second column or the last column, b'zechus is underlined. It's tali and zchus. And there's no mazel. So the Eitz HaDa'as adds another dimension to this. He says, it's not as simple as doing what Hashem wants and not doing what Hashem wants. It's a combination. In Israel, if you do what Hashem wants, you determine your own destiny. There's no mazel. It's all schus. If you don't do what Hashem wants, you determine your own destiny. But it's not so pleasant. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's more to what happens than our schus. There's a mazel element. There's an inexplicable component. So he separates pasuk Daled from pasuk Yud Aleph, basing it on the word ba'atzecha. If you go back to page 1, again, if you have dexterous enough fingers to hang on to 13 and 1 at the same time, right? In pasuk Daled it says, "Kelayeh b'cha'avin kivarech v'rocha Hashem alekecha Hashem ba'aretz asher Hashem alekecha leisnacham nachla l'rishta." Has to do with the Holy Land. Okay. I suppose he says ba'atzach and pasuk Yud Aleph as well. So I don't know, but that's how he draws the distinction. In Israel, it's totally in zechus alone. Outside of Israel, it's a combination of zechus and mazel. So he's also resolving the question, and he adds another twist, another nuance to the discussion. And then he, of course, says the point that one of the women mentions. I just want to show it to you inside, where he says, Omnam, I think I'm 9 lines from the top of the 4th column over here. He says, Omnam eina inyan ella shekasher ein Yisrael eisem etzenish al mokim. Page 13. You see, Yisrael is the first word on the line. It must be 9 lines from the top of the 4th column. As kol hadeira hu nimsar b'yad hamazel. When Jewish people are not the way they're supposed to be, the whole generation is given over to the mazel. Ve'ein hadavar toli l'chol haprati b'schus. It no longer is dependent on the individual's own merits. Once the generation is determined to be non-righteous and they're subject to mazel, it's not just the Rishayim, it's everybody. And this is where you start getting confused. If God's in charge, the classic question, tzaddik v'ra loy, if he's righteous, why is he suffering? And the answer is there's a connection between one Jew and all Jews. Okay? This is the Eitz HaDa'as. Enough. Now, on page 14 you have a shalom. Oh yeah, I wish I had another hour. I appreciate that. It's very generous and kind of you.
You ready to stay longer?
Let me tell you what the shalom says. I found this shalom like a needle in a haystack. How I found this shalom is a miracle. But the shalom has a discourse on the letters Mem and Samach. The final Mem in the letter Samach, which is discussed in the Shas also. Mem and Samach are both sealed. The difference, however, is the Samach is round at the bottom and the Mem is square at the bottom. The round bottom indicates a lack of firmness, a lack of permanence. The square bottom of the Mem demonstrates permanence and wholeness. Okay? And he says that the Mem and the Samach, let's use Hasidic terminology in enlightening the Shalom. I'm not going to read the Shalom inside, but of course everybody here is going to take this home and you're going to review every single thing that we learned, plus you're going to read the Yalkut and all the things that we skipped, and of course you'll read the Shalom yourself. So I'm going to help you learn it on your own. You take it home tonight at about 1:30 in the morning when you get to it, but please no phone calls. So I'll just tell you briefly what he says. Think of it in these terms. We speak about making the world a home for Hashem. A home needs 4 walls. If a home has only 3 walls, like for example a beis, or a hay, or a ches, it's open on one side. And you know what the Gemara says, that the Eibishter made the world, that Ruach Tzfeinis Psucha, Hashem didn't seal the northern sky. And it's a medrash that the Eibishter says, if you think you're such a wonderful scientist, you finish what I started. I left the northern heavens open, let me see you close it up. It says that the shape of many letters is closed on 3 sides and open on the 4th. It shows them lack of perfection. The mem and the samach are sealed, which shows on a permanent home for the Eibishter. But there's a difference. The samach is circular, which shows that this home is rocking, and the mem is square, which shows that the home is permanent. So the Shalah said this is the difference between a sukkah and a bayis. A sukkah is a temporary home, a hut, and a bayis is a permanent home. And the sukkah represents us making the world a home for Hashem, but it's a precarious home. It's a vulnerable home. And therefore, the first letter of the word sukkah is a samach. To indicate that even though you've made Hashem's home, when you close it from all 4 directions, it's tilted, it's shaking back and forth. As opposed to bayis, the permanent home of the Eibishter, it begins with the letter beis of Bereshis, and it culminates with the mem. It changes from a beis to a mem. It's a long story how that happens and why that happens. You're just going to have to take my word for it, okay? That the beis is semi-permanent, and from the beis becomes the beis of Bereshis becomes the mem of Lamar B'Hamisra. It's a long discussion in many Sifrei Musar. But this is how he resolves the question. When we make a home for Hashem, but the home is precarious, it's samach-like, in a word like that, there's poor people. If we make the home for Hashem, but it's mem-like, it's a healthy home for Hashem, then ephes, then there won't be any poor people. That's how he resolves it. He says, if the home we make for Hashem, we made a home for Hashem, we're good Jews, and we built a home for Hashem, and we've closed it in all 4 sides. But if it's flimsy, if it's weak, if it lacks integrity, it's comparable to a samach. It's vulnerable and it's weak. And the Torah says, in that environment there's still miskinim, vulnerable ones, dependent ones, needy ones. If the home we make for Hashem is shloss-mem-like, it's healthy, it's solid, it's permanent, ephes till there won't be any poor people. So he links it to different levels. And for those who like Kabbalah, it's a difference between Bina and Chochmah. What does that mean? At this moment I have no idea. Okay, this is the Shalom. And then we have the Rebbe's Sikha. And the Rebbe has such a simple thing, a very poshta zach. I made an error. This is from the Kutta Sichas Chelik, I forgot. That's a great answer, eh? I think it's Chelik Yutes. Maybe it's Chavdal. Says the Rebbe like this. This was a Sikha the Rebbe said in the eve of a Shemitah year, or the end of a Shemitah year. Und durch der Anhage, through this conduct, vet men zeicha sein b'korev, we will reach imminently some kiyum hayir, to the realization of the prophecy from la yi yebecha evyin. That's pasuk Dalet. There will not be any poor people. Although in pasuk Yud Aleph it says kilayechel evyin, it says Rebbe v'yesh loymar as b'chol zeh v'der inyan from kamach erdan zayin. That even when there's no longer poor people who need gifts of charity, there will always be the idea of Jews helping each other out. Gemilas chasadim, giving alone. And I'm understanding the implication to be that the Torah says there will always be the need for people to help each other. But it's conceivable that there will be a point where there will not be a need for people to give each other. There's a big difference between tzedakah and gemilas chasadim. And I want you to know that the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek once said a maimer about the importance of gemilas chasadim, people giving loans. So a whole group of business people made a whole train of borrowing and lending. They didn't even need the money. They would just lend and borrow to do the mitzvah. And they would hold the money till they doesn't get a date to return it. And when the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek was informed that they were borrowing and lending, they didn't need it for their business, it's just doing the mitzvah, it gave the Tzemach Tzedek a gewaldige nachas ruach. Unbelievable nachas, unbelievable pleasure. And now, let's turn to the end of the package. And you have here a maimer from Friedrich Rebbe, which I didn't print in its entirety, and I'm not going to learn it with you. And on page 19 there's a letter. And on page 20 there's a letter. And on page 21 there's a letter from Friedrich Rebbe. What we're about to read is a story that I've told the women who come to my regular classes many, many times over the years. It's an interesting episode. It's a piece of history. And I want to finish the class with this. And it's page 19. And what we're about to read is a story of the Rebbe Marash saying a maimed. The maimed that the Rebbe Marash said on that occasion is published. And the maimed from the previous Rebbe, which was said in 1931, which I printed before, is based on that maimed. Here's the story. In Russia, in Tsarist Russia, Jews suffered miserably. Miserably. It's unimaginable how difficult life was. One of the symptoms of the suffering was that the government used to place restrictions on where Jewish people could live. And from time to time, they would just change the border. That's it, change the border. They decided they're too close to this country, too close to that country, too close. What they're really saying was the Jewish people built a city, they became successful. Let's take it away from them, let's start over. You know what happens when the community of Jews is told, move? Move. Oh, sure, you could sell your property, you could sell your business, you could sell your livestock. What are you getting for it? The cruelty of it was Tsarist Russia. It was brutal. And every 50 years or so, they just moved the border. That's it. So in 1868, such an event occurred. They moved the border. And there were Jews inside the border, and there were Nebuch Jews, I think it's 50 communities outside the border. They have to bail each other out. And you need big money, and nobody had any money. The rich were not rich. Okay? So on page 19, on the right side of the page, Reish Nun Dalet, okay, the previous Rebbe goes into all these details. That they had a very high tax, and they were unable to pay the tax. So I'm gonna show you. Lift up your eyes, please. Right there. Ad. Okay, it's the second full paragraph, or the third full paragraph from the bottom. 4 lines from the end. Ad Shebishnas Tafresh Obches, in the year 1868. Harbe Miyoyit. Many communities. Ubayesen, especially B'Mechuzes, Kalaraj, Ubenderi. These are neighborhoods, these are regions in Russia. Bo'ad Mishba, the communities were collapsing under the weight of the taxation. They couldn't pay the taxes that was collected over the course of 2 years. So first of all, they were going to be displaced. They were looking forward. There was an anticipation of God forbid they would be incarcerated. Many great taxes. The Marash, Shahaya, who was the leader of the Askani Aklal in his generation, his looked into their circumstance, into their condition. He wanted to help them. And since most of the wealthy landowners of Mechuzes, Kalarashu, Benderi, Golobir, Kishinev, the city of Kishinev had a substantial number of well-to-do Jews. Hine, Kishinasa Haid, Kvegidushus Azmor, Rav Kadosh Mimarinband, the Rebbe Marash was coming back from Marinband. The Rebbe spells it here with the Nun after the Ayin. The Rebbe Marash traveled for health to Marinband, which is in Austria. And it's near Vienna, I believe. And on the way back, could be I'm wrong, wherever it is, someplace in Western Europe, he stopped in Kishinev. B'tchilas Elo, Shnas, Tafresh, Chof Ches, Lebeisei Lubavitcher, he was on the way home to Lubavitcher. So Nosa Derech Odessa, he stopped in the city of Odessa. B'kavona, with the intent, Lasis Magbis, to make a fundraiser, L'Tevasam, for the benefit of these Jews, Ba'Odessa u'B'Kishinev. Ashirei Odessa, the rich people of Odessa, Nis'eded u'B'Seidet Esteva, they were very aroused, V'Yinadzu Schubam Agunim, and they gave generously to this cause. Like Kein Ashirei Kishinev, as opposed to the wealthy people of Kishinev, Shalai Yitzaidedu B'Seidet Haraoya, they weren't sufficiently aroused to give. And you're not talking about giving $1 or $2. You're talking about mamish, you have $1 million, give $50. You have 100, give 50. You're talking about mamish, it's not taking your shirt off your back. We're talking about the kind of tzedakah which Jews have given for the last 2,000 years to help each other out. If you know the history, what happened in the Netherlands when the Jews came after the Inquisition, Tens of thousands of Jews just moved into Holland, and their brothers bailed them out with blood money. It happened over and over and over after the war, after the Holocaust, what American Jews did for the survivors. It's unbelievable, the kinds of money that were raised, and the Mesiras Nefesh that was involved. So the Rebbe Maharash came to Kishinev and says, divvy up, we need geld. And it wasn't happening. So there's a long story which we're going to read on the next page. The bottom line is he spent the whole Tishrei in Kishinev. And Ba'achas, Tziches HaKodesh, in one of the holy talks, Shahoyol Kvei Kedushas Azmor Avkat Bishop Shmuel L'Seicheach, Be'esvadas Hashiri Kishinev, and it was a meeting of the wealthy people of Kishinev, he said, Omar, top of the second column, page 19. Okay, now if you haven't followed me, now's the time to tune in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bara Seiloma Yabruah V'Seid Mashpiyah Makabel. God Almighty designed His world and those who live in it to follow a pattern of givers and receivers. Everybody gives and everybody takes. Hashemayim va'aretz, the heaven and the earth. Hashemayim mashpiyim gishmei bracha, the earth gives us rain. Va'aretz makabels, the earth receives it. Gam b'tzmachim, yesh mashpiyim makabel, amongst plants there are givers and takers. Kehadit nan b'psachem peridal mishnechas markivim dekolam kol hayem ba'ba asav v'nisim, that the animals help, the plants help each other out. V'chein b'bnei adam, it's true amongst human beings. Yesh ashirim, there are wealthy Jews who are mashpiyim, who are the givers. V'aniyim makabel, and they're the poor people who have to take. Ha'ashirim tzrichem laseis, the rich need to give. V'aniyim tzrichem makabel, and the poor need to take. V'aniyim v'hutayves v'ashirim, it's the benefit of the wealthy. Kidrash shazav al-pasach asher asisi imei rus beis yites. It says that I did with him. Asher asisi imi loy nama. It doesn't say that he did good to me, but he did good to himself. El asher asisi imoy. Malamed, this teaches us that the Rus did a bigger favor to Boaz than Boaz did to Rus. Sheyoysa me'asher ba'alabayas eisim ha'ani, more than the layperson, than the business person does to the poor person. Oysa ha'ani and ba'alabayas, the poor person does with the rich person. Okay? Lafichach amra Rus, therefore Rus says, Asher asisi imoy, I did him a favor to let him give me. Harbe pu'ulis, v'harbe teves asisi imei, I tried very, very hard. B'shul shachaleni plus achas, to give me a broken piece of bread. And when he gave me that piece of bread, after I pleaded with him for it, I did him a favor. V'akadosh baruch hu geizer, God Almighty decrees, mi yihi ha'asher ha'mashpiyah, or mi yihi ani ha'makabel. Who's going to be wealthy and a giver, who's going to be poor and a taker. And here comes the point. Aval ha'ani toyen, the poor person complains, hey, nem es Rebbeinu Shalom. It may be true, Master of the world. But you created a world that involves people sharing, giving and receiving. Why must I be the impoverished one and the taker? And somebody else, he should be wealthy and the giver. Let me be wealthy. And they'll be poor, and I'll give them. What do I have to be poor? And the end of the story was that after the Rebbe said this, and he didn't just say it, the Rebbe Manash, when he expressed his emotions, it was like a physical force. They melted. The next paragraph says, Asicha Kadesh will do this holy talk. It opened up their hearts. They gave generously. But it spread all over. The ripples, the whole country heard about this talk, and it created a tremendous inspiration for the idea that when you give tzedakah, you're doing yourself a favor. There's a mimer about this, and like I said, mimer is published today. Everything is published today. The Rebbe Marash said it in it's printed in Sefer Memorim Tov Reish Chof Ches, 1868. The previous Rebbe repeated this mimer with his own commentary in 1931, and I printed the first half of the previous Rebbe's mimer here. I was pushed it cheaper on the paper. The last two pages have another version of the same story, which you can read on your own. This is from the Sefer Tov Rebbe Manash. I don't have time. The bottom line is that the Rebbe Manash was going through enormous amounts of personal hardships. His house burned to the ground. He had nothing to come home to, and the people. They were afraid to tell him what happened. Because here he's suffering so much because of Yiddish Tzaras, and here Elul has to go home for Yom Tov. The Rebbe got word from an alien source that he had no place to go home to. So he called in his shamash and gave his shamash a letter with instructions what they should build and how they should build and where they should take everything. And he said they shouldn't worry. He says they'll work. I thought he says 30 or 40 men, or whatever. They'll work non-stop, day and night, and they'll finish the work in a month. By the time the Rebbe came home, it was all done. I'm spending Tishrei in Kishinev. And he spent that Tishrei, Tafresh Chavtes, 1868 to 69, in Kishinev. And this was the highlight. This Maimer that he said with so much emotion, that he Pashat gave his neshama to those people, that when you give tzedakah, you're not doing a favor, you're receiving a favor. Okay.